Has got his mark here on F10. It's a pink mark. Here we go. Good afternoon. Hey, it's Friday already, TGIF, and we hope that everybody's feeling good on this beautiful day. Those skies are still blue, and we just had some wonderful weather here in the last few mornings. I've loved it. It's kind of like fall, but summer's coming back, folks. Well, you know, I've told you that we were going to have really interesting guests this week, and we have, and today is no exception. We've got Rich Griffith, and he is the new lead pastor of Chapel Hill United Methodist Church. And Rich has spent the past 29 years in youth and family ministry and is completing his doctorate in youth and family and culture studies, where he's attacking the issue of systemic abandonment and criminalization of our young people. And we're going to tell you what that means.
Yes, ma'am.
And Rich is a single dad with two great kids. I met him last night, Aaron and Dylan. Also, he knows what being a parent's all about, and the fact that there's no perfect kids, no perfect families. 1 out and 2 out of 3 probably is dysfunctional.
Yes, ma'am.
You know that.
Oh.
But anyway, Rich and I are going to talk about the young folks today. And another thing, one of the things that I'd like for you to talk about, Rich, is whenever a young person does something horrible on the news, in the media, where were the parents? That was what they said.
Yes, ma'am.
Says, you know, we can also talk about the common knowledge of the dysfunction of our society and how it's become an excuse for continued worsening dysfunction. You know, I hated that word to begin with, dysfunction. I really did, because I worked with Family Focus for 4 years, and that, of course, was the state. And I went around and talked to groups of people about our therapeutic foster kids and how we needed foster parents. So I know a little bit where you're coming from.
Sure, yes, ma'am.
But you are a parent that you adopted your boys.
Yes, ma'am. That's true. And they're 2 great kids. And boy, it's been a journey. I mean, it's something I resisted at first and fought it for 4 years. And just, you know, I heard that voice inside say, you know, if not you, then who?
Well, Rich is a single parent, and that's what makes it so unique. I mean, you're brave.
Well, I like to jokingly say I put the fun in dysfunction. So, but, you know, I think it's better for kids to have somewhat of a stable home environment, you know, compared to aging out of the system. And I think what convicted me of that is when kids go to college, if they make it that far, or go in the military, or, you know, what do they put down on their application for an address, for a home address? You know, what do they put down for next of kin? So I think that's one of the things that really convicted me to start that journey. And one of my doctoral papers was on theology of adoption.
Boy, you picked a good one. That's a tough one. I mean, it's tough for all parents.
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
Those kids didn't come with directions.
No.
And you know, you've got to really, really figure out why these children are here.
Sure.
You caused it.
Right.
I mean, well, you know, I'm talking about biological parents.
Sure.
And sometimes they don't even think about that. They don't even think that they are the ones that made these children, and they're the ones that's supposed to be responsible for them and their wonderful upbringing.
You know, I think it's true, and that is a pretty good oversight, I think, of what's going on in our culture. But let me say this, too. I do recognize that there are some really good parents that have kids turn out not so well.
I know that, yeah.
And then there's some really bad parents who happen to have kids turn out really well. And
they get talked about. That's okay, but they need to get talked about.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I think the real struggle that comes in, and we mentioned systemic abandonment, if that's a good way to go into that now.
Yeah, go into that.
Again, and I say systemic, and this actually comes from Dr. Chap Clark, who's my professor at Fuller Theological Seminary, great guy. Systemic in that it's not intentional, but some of the decisions that are being made have unforeseen ramifications. And so when I say systemic, it's not intentional abandonment.
But isn't it it's a vicious circle?
Oh, it can become very much a vicious circle to the point where it moves. What my contention is that it's moving beyond systemic to systematic abandonment, which is intentional. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of this, if you don't mind. Just one of the things I think, like, for instance, in parks and recreation, my sons play sports. It used to be 10, 15 years ago, you would hear reports about coaches and umpires and parents maybe getting into some scuffles and things like that.
Yeah. Parents fighting with the referees or the coaches or whatever.
And setting a horrible example.
Horrible.
But now what we see is we actually see parents hitting kids. You know, the hockey dad, you name it.
Attacking the players.
Exactly. And these are children.
Yeah.
And so we've lost our way. But that's just parts of. Now, again, when I say these things, I'm not trying to put an indictment on any one particular organization. I'm just saying where our culture has moved to. We're just
giving an example.
Yeah. And we got plenty of examples. So education, there are great educators out there. There's a great school system here in Rome. My boys go to it, and I'm excited about it. As a whole, though, the education system has become more about teaching children what to think rather than how to think.
Amen. You got that right.
And, it all is part of No Child Left Behind and zero tolerance and things like that. That's where I get into this concept of criminalizing our children for things that used to be normal childhood behaviors, that kids are going to make mistakes. That's what kids do. But what we've done is we've either excused our kids and allowed the dysfunction to continue, or on the other extreme of it, we've criminalized our kids. So our kids are trying to figure life out. And churches are just as bad, honestly. It's more about how many kids' butts you have in a pew rather than whether they're really getting what they need.
Exactly. You're right. And, we are guilty of not having enough time, first of all.
Yes, ma'am.
We're guilty of not taking enough time, second of all. And those kids, all they want is some of your time.
Absolutely.
You know that with your boys.
Absolutely.
I mean, they love to spend time with you.
Absolutely. For the most part. So unless there's girls around for my oldest son, then he's kind of go away, Dad,
Well, Aaron's getting to that age. And he's going to be looking around.
Yeah.
But really and truly, I think that with what you're doing and you're emphasizing the importance of being a good parent, and of course your population over there at Chapel Hill, they're a little bit older.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And they got grandkids, so this can really apply to them too.
Absolutely.
Grandparents are important in a child's life.
Absolutely. I grew up without grandparents. Long story behind that, but now what used to be a minor occurrence of grandparents raising children, again, because of dysfunction in our culture, we have a growing number of grandparents raising their children.
Yes.
And I got to give it to the folks at Chapel Hill. They have really bought into this concept of reaching the next generation, whatever it takes. Matter of fact, they've bought on to 90% of what we do. If we can't answer the question, does this reach the next generation, we don't do it. And so that's a brave move for the folks at Chapel Hill. And so we're really looking at trying to strengthen and love families of any kind, any sort. So we're pretty excited about that vision and mission, and we're not the only show in town, and I support any church that reaches young people and families.
Well, that's what we want to do at Parkview. We've changed our name from Wesley Southern Methodist Church to Parkview Baptist Church.
Wow.
And of course, we're in the park, and that's why it's Parkview.
Sure.
And we're not, any different. We're just, I really can't see the big difference. Liz Massengale, my good friend who took me with her last night to her I called it a little outing with great people, playing Phase 10, and we just enjoyed it at the church and everything. Got to meet some folks. And Betty, you behave, okay? And George, you too. But it was, all the gals and people that I met over there. Rita, I understand she stays around the church a lot and does a lot of work. But Liz Massengale, she's my good friend for like 17, 18 years. But met this group of people over there, and they're just loving folks. And, we want our church to survive and go on. And through attrition, you lose people.
Yes, ma'am.
Through the death in a church, it's horrible to say, but we're getting older.
Sure. And I think that's why young people drop out of the church. And I think there's a solution. I know there are solutions to the systemic abandonment. And it is what Chapel Hill and other churches are trying to do when they reach younger generations. It's simply this. Most kids drop out of church, not because they didn't have a great youth program, but it's probably the reason that they are dropping out of church because they did have a great youth program. What I mean is They grow up. They go to college. They go to a church that is not typically what they're used to in specific programmed youth ministry, and so they feel uncomfortable. And so what we need more than anything else is intergenerational interaction. We need kids to feel belong and care. My boys love coming to game night.
Do they?
They do. They missed it yesterday because of football things and commitments and stuff, but they missed being there. And they don't. Their grandparents are 2+ hours away and then 10 hours away. And
so these people make up for that a little bit.
Absolutely, they do. And my boys have grown to love these folks already just in 2 months.
That's wonderful. That's just absolutely wonderful. And you've only been here 2 months.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's why we wanted to get him on today, is to welcome Rich to Rome, and I hope that you'll enjoy this city as much as I have. You know, I came from Rockmart, 20 miles down the road. Little young gal who wanted to get into radio and had been in radio for a year. And this is home.
It's a great area.
You'll never find a place, a city, metropolitan area, any heartwarming sometimes, because I can tell about events and some of the results of money raisers or fundraisers, and it just warms my heart because everybody's so generous.
You got to give it to the city council members and everybody in every level of government here at Rome. They really, you can feel it. As an outsider coming in now, you can feel that they're very intentional about building.
Get it done. Here we go. We're back right here on Talk of the Town on a Friday, TGIF. Hope you've got a lot of things planned for this weekend. And Rich Griffith is the new lead pastor at Chapel Hill United Methodist Church. And Rich, did you know we went there, my husband and I went there back in 93 for about a year?
I did not know that.
Yep,
how about that?
We did. And there's still nice folks over there.
Yes, ma'am. I haven't run them off yet.
Well, you know, the only reason not probably, but the only reason that we left was the fact that Jim McCree was pastor at Wesley. And he was my best friend in the whole wide world. He got me into radio. Wow. And Betty, his wife, was my next best friend. Oh. So they wanted us to come and just visit. Sure. And we did. And, well, I was taken. That's good. So, but we've been there since 93. And, but folks over there at Chapel Hill are just sweet as they can be. And the youth program, how many kids have you got there at Chapel Hill?
We're growing. There's probably, honestly, only about a half dozen. Now, I've been in youth ministries where we've grown it from 15 to over 700, which is
Isn't that something?
Crazy. But, so we're growing because of our new focus, so we're pretty excited about that.
All right, now, you're doing your doctorate on tackling the issue of systemic abandonment and criminalization of our young people.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is a mouthful. So let's start from the beginning. What do you mean when you say systemic? People don't know what systemic means. Right. It means from the inside and from the, everything inside going out.
Unintentional, too.
Unintentional.
And so I think we're living in a culture, and I'm a little bit of an odd duck for a pastor, so I get that. But
no, you're not. You're interesting.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, for instance, I think that sometimes there are reasons for divorce. I mean, I feel like
I do too.
If a husband is beating his wife, he's not being faithful to his vows.
He's not a husband.
Exactly. And so now, but what I will say on the other spectrum, because I don't want people to feel like I'm throwing stones at people who have been divorced. I'm not doing that at all.
No.
But I do think in our culture that divorce has become too easy.
Oh, I agree. And I mean, all you have to do is go and apply for it, and 60 days later, you've got it.
I remember seeing a billboard that said, simple divorce, uncontested, $499. And we've become a disposable culture, and unfortunately,
there's no commitment.
Exactly.
None.
Well, and our kids are the ones that are suffering from that lack of commitment. Now, my parents probably didn't have the best marriage in the world, but you know what? They stayed together for me and my brother.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a different day. Now, again, so what I mean by this is unfortunately what's going on, because we've become a very narcissistic and selfish culture in some ways. And so what has happened is when divorce becomes easier, what happens is mom and dad now become more involved with their emotions toward each other.
Well, they can become enemies.
Exactly. And the kids pick up on, and then the kids get put in the middle of it. And then
they have to choose. They can't choose.
Right. Or they make the wrong choice and the other parent gets mad. Or,
exactly.
or worse, they pit the parents against each other because there's no more, even worse
Well, that's the only way they can deal with it.
Exactly.
That's the only way they know to deal with it.
And their kids, they're going to try and get their way sometime.
Exactly.
But I think what comes out of that is, beside that, is now mom and or dad are trying to make ends meet financially now, because divorce is much more costly.
Yes.
And so they're trying to make ends meet. They're trying to deal with their own wounds. They're trying to, maybe they have a new romantic relationship. Again, that's all well and good, but the reality is because of all that self-involvement, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to label folks in a negative, but these are just the systemic results of divorce. And so unless we're
given.
unless we're very cognizant of it, our kids are the ones that are paying the price. And so because they don't have that structured home life. Now, again, I'm saying if there's domestic abuse and stuff like that, I don't want kids exposed to that either.
No.
So,
see, when I said a while ago, it's a vicious cycle. All right, children see their dad beating up on their mom, or vice versa, their mom beating up on their dad, or throwing things, and being violent, and being, abusive. This is, I don't know, some way, some form just sinks into some kids, and they will in turn do it themselves.
They act it out,
and they'll be that when they grow up.
Right.
They could have those tendencies of being abusive to their spouse,
and so that is the epitome of systemic.
Yeah,
it's
there
not
you
intended,
go.
But kids see it. Kids are caught up in the whirlwind of it, and it affects them, like it or not.
Exactly.
And so, I think that's what really concerns me, is we're just not as intentional about thinking about these things. And honestly, I don't think for the most part, most churches have been equipped to deal with these things, because divorce has been so taboo that we're not thinking about, okay, it's happened. We know we live in a fallen world. So that being the case, how can we bring about restoration and redemption and healing rather than keep looking at the problem?
We need a lot of love is what we need.
Yes, ma'am, we do. We sure do.
I mean, if we could just gather up a whole bunch of that and give it out like these pill poppers, and take the love in instead of the pills, that'd be good. We could really fix this world if we had another hour. You know that, don't you?
I think the other thing I'd like to point out here, too, is the fact that, like my boys, both are adopted. And I tell families and parents, honestly, just love by itself is not enough.
No.
There has to be a commitment. And I told my boys, particularly when I was going through some really, really tough times, one of them, I said, I'm committed to you. I'm going to be your dad no matter what. And there were some rough times. There were some very rough times. But
well, you got your first one at what age?
He was 11, and
that is a difficult age.
Yes, ma'am. Wait
and then the other one, Dylan, he's
11 now as well. Aaron's been with me for almost 3.5 years.
And you just got Dylan.
Yes, ma'am. Right before the move here to Rome. So this poor boy's been through the ringer.
I know he loves it. I met the boys last night, and they're just really something special. Well, okay, we got just a minute or two here, and just tell me what you'd like to tell our listeners out there, and welcome to Rome. And Rich, we'll have you back.
I'd love to, because we need to talk about that issue of criminalization. But here's what I'd like to leave with the listeners. There is never a situation that is beyond hope. It might take creative investigating, it might take creative planning, but there is always hope, and there is always healing. And I think that's what we want our church to be about. I think that's what every church wants to be about. So let's just go after it.
You got that right. Hope. When you lose that, you've lost half the battle.
Absolutely.
And so it's just really, it's really nice to know, though, that you'll be there for at least the next 2 years.
I hope so. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Hopefully our DS is listening.
We know that your whole congregation is probably listening today, because George, what is George's last name now?
Gaddy.
Gaddy.
Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I shouldn't have said I'm broken confidentiality.
George, thank you so much for calling. He called everybody this morning.
He's a great guy.
He's letting everybody know that you were going to be on Talk of the Town. And I hope we have not disappointed your congregation. They really, they think you hung the moon.
Well, they'll get to know me a little better, and we'll shoot that out of the
water. but really and truly, let's see, we got another minute or so. When we're talking about criminalization and decriminalization of the whatever, you know, that takes a long, long while, and maybe we can bring that up next time you're here.
I'd love to.
And, you know, when we hear about all these shootings, and like we just had a 20-year-old up Calhoun Way, up that way, kill somebody and shoot 3 other people, and it's terrible. And these people have gone through a lot of trauma in their life, and there's a reason why all this is happening.
Sure.
And we can't blame them altogether.
Right.
We've got to take some of the blame.
Absolutely. We got to get our focus off of ourselves as a